So to start off with, I want to talk about launching an investigation. So I always say it's an important point to remember that, which can often be overlooked, is that not every issue will require an investigation. So depending on the nature of a matter that you're dealing with, it may be that you don't need to conduct a full investigation. To put that into context, it may be that you have received some feedback from an employee who has given voice to the fact they have frustrations in their working relationship with a line manager. It may be that actually that doesn't require you to conduct an investigation. It may be that you need to sit down with that individual and give them some specific feedback, and you may make records of that conversation you've had with that line manager, but it wouldn't necessarily be that you need to go away and do a full investigation. That being said, it could be that actually the concerns raised with you form a pattern of behaviour that you've identified, and it may be at that stage that you want to conduct an investigation. But what I always say to my clients is, let's look at the issue in hand and let's make a decision about, do we need to investigate? Most typically, if you have an employee who's raised a grievance, yes, you would need to investigate that. If you're dealing with conduct issues under your disciplinary procedure, then absolutely you would want to investigate those issues. But it's just taking a pragmatic approach. Not every issue is made equal, and certainly wouldn't necessarily require you to conduct a full investigation. That being said, if an investigation is required, I always advise that you should formulate a detailed investigation plan. Now, this is something I find certainly with the clients I work with, this can often be overlooked, because when clients come to me with a particular issue, often they feel the kind of pressure in terms of getting started and looking at what they need to investigate. And what I always say is actually the best piece of work you're going to do will be the investigation plan, because that will set out the framework that you're going to follow for the remaining part of the investigation process itself. So a really good investigation plan should set out who the investigating officer will be. You want to identify that person, name them in your plan. It should clearly set out the terms of reference of the investigation. What I mean by the terms of reference is, what are the issues that need to be investigated? You want to be really specific with your terms of reference. You want to clearly set out the issues and the issues that need to be explored as part of the investigation process. Another important aspect of your terms of reference is to make sure that you can draw on those terms of reference to develop a line of questioning, and we'll come on to that a little bit later, but it's a really important piece of work. Again, within your investigation plan, a provisional timeline is essential. That gives you something to work towards. You want to identify any relevant company policies and procedures which are going to apply to the specific matter that you are investigating. So that's really important as well. So it's quite front-loaded, the investigation planning stage, but if you do it right, it will make the investigation process itself much easier to manage moving forward. You also need to be clear on the issues which need to be addressed. So you need to think about the questions you need to find answers to. That will, again, help give you a framework for your line of questioning. You also want to think early on at the planning stage about the types of evidence which need to be collected. That might be things like witness statements, CCTV footage, copies of documentation. So that could be emails, for example, letters sent from HR, or letters sent from line managers to employees concerned. It could be things like gaining access to IT logs. All of those things you need to think about, because actually there is often logistics around gathering that information. CCTV footage, you may need to speak to IT or another person within the organisation. Certainly with IT access logs, you'll need to speak to IT to gain access to those, and then you'll need to sit down and spend time reviewing those and understanding the data that's contained within. So again, planning early on will help you set out a clear kind of timeline of how long you think it's going to take you to conduct that investigation from start to finish. You also need to think about the people who will need to be interviewed, so identifying your witnesses. You want to speak to the complainant, you want to speak to the respondent, and anybody else they identify during your initial meetings. But it's really helpful to set out early on who do you need to speak to, and making sure you're planning those meetings proactively. And that being said, it may be that as you investigate parties, you will identify other individuals you may need to speak to. So your investigation plan is very much a working document. You will add to it as you work through the investigation process. But you do want to have a finalised draft that you're working from before you start the investigation process, because again, that will help you plan out the investigation and all the relevant aspects of work that need to be undertaken. As I say, often people say to me, the investigation planning phase seems like an onerous process, but actually it's so important to get the planning right so that you can make sure that you do the investigation itself justice. You want to produce a defensible investigation outcome report, and the best way of doing that is being really organised and being really clear on what it is you need to do as part of that process.